There are many different job boards for truckers. Why use the job board on thetrucker.com? There's several reasons. Thetrucker.com's objective is to help professional truck drivers find quality truck driving jobs and to help trucking companies find quality truck drivers. Thetrucker.com has the most comprehensive listing of truck driving jobs and job resources, and new and existing job listings are updated regularly. Thetrucker.com's job search function is easy to use and allows job seekers to search for jobs by driver type, trailer type, route type, location, company, endorsement, and experience requirements. Our proprietary application processing system, or APS, uses a sophisticated algorithm to match and automatically send qualified driver applications to the trucking company in real time. So your job application is efficiently processed and submitted to the trucking company immediately after the APS matches your qualifications to the job requirements. When it's time to consider making a change, you can find the right resources at thetrucker.com.
You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live, where James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly provide owner-operators of commercial trucks with expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking fleet. It's time to mind your trucking business.
Welcome in TNC Radio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Irvin, and James Rogers is out today. We'll say he's on assignment. Let's say it that way. It always sounds like he's doing something mightily important. So James is on assignment, unavailable today, but Jamie and I will be with you for the next hour, talking all things around the trucking business. We got some trucking industry news to discuss. We're going to continue our discussion around electric vehicles and check in with what's been going on in the world of trucking. Jamie, I understand since last we've been on that you have attended a show right here in Texas, right?
Yeah, I just got back from Grapevine, Texas, just outside of Dallas, Fort Worth. That is the annual Heavy Duty Aftermarket Week show. It's the time when the parts industry comes together, both the manufacturers and all the parts distributors. So for the Heavy Duty Parts Report, it's our biggest show of the year, and it did not disappoint. There was record attendance from distributors as well as record one-on-one meetings between manufacturers and distributors. There was so much going on. We had a nice booth there, 10 by 20. We had our podcast booth. We were recording interviews and doing meetings with industry experts. So it was a great show. Loved being there. And I think it was very important for the parts side of the business to come together in that capacity, because the last couple of years we've had meetings, but it hasn't been like it used to be before the pandemic. So this is the first time since the pandemic started that it really felt like we're back to normal.
And did everybody get each other sick again?
Well, I think that did happen to a degree. I know that my daughter had a cold the week before. And so I was feeling a little run down.
Yeah, you were. I remember you were not feeling well about a week before.
Yeah, so I started to feel better in time to go down and do the trip, and I kept my distance the first day, and then after that I was feeling like 100% again, so I was good. But I did talk to a few people who after the show had a pretty nasty cold, but nothing serious.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's not good to get everybody in one place and then get COVID or whatever to sweep through and infect a bunch of people. So doesn't sound like it was as big. That other show that you went to, it sounded like everybody came out of that one sick.
Yeah, so back in the fall, we went to Apex in Las Vegas, and that one was bad. There was a couple of breakthrough COVID infections that happened, and entire groups of people were sick. I didn't hear that after HDAW, other than some people getting some colds. That was about it. So it seems like again, it just seems like we are getting back to normal, which really is, it's good. It's been a long time coming. We've all had to endure. And I think it's time for us to get back to normal life, as normal as it can be with the crazy world we're living in.
Yeah, exactly. And it is kind of a crazy world out there right now. We've got a lot of things going on in the world. Speaking of crazy, since you use that word, let's talk about California. Oh, we love you, California. At least we love the drivers in California. But California itself, a lot of people, most people, I think, assumed that CARB, which for those of you who don't know, I think you all know, that's the California Air Resources Board. They passed lots of different regulations. And a lot of the regulations impact trucks and buses and other forms of transportation. They even have regulations, though, that determine what kind of lawnmower you can have. Okay. Well, CARB passed a while back and implemented at the beginning of this year that trucks with engines older than 2010 are no longer welcome in California. Think about that for a minute. There are a lot of trucks on the road right now that are before 2010.
Is there an exemption on that for vehicles that received a retrofit? Because a good friend of mine and client who started diesel emission service back in 2006, he was one of the dominant players in providing retrofit services when the initial regulations came through that you had to update your vehicle to have a diesel emission system on it. So they're exempting anybody who did the retrofit. Is that correct?
If the engine itself has been rebuilt and, meets the standards after 2010, then yes, you are exempt.
So it wouldn't be an engine rebuild necessarily. It would be the retrofit of a diesel emission system being added to an engine that from the truck OE didn't originally have that. That's interesting.
Here's the quote. Truckers can still drive older trucks, but the engine must be model year 2010 or newer. Few exceptions apply.
That's crazy to me then, because they spent tens of millions. No, scrap that. They spent over $100 million at least in grants retrofitting all of those vehicles just 10 years ago. So if you've retrofitted your vehicle to have a diesel emission system, who cares when the engine was made? It's already up to 2010 emission standards. That doesn't make sense to me.
We're talking California.
Right. I forgot that. California, right? California does not translate to let's make sense.
So California, that starts with C, that rhymes with C, and that spells crazy. So
yeah. If the retrofit that was done on your truck is no longer valid, then they're requiring you to do an engine swap.
Yes. So here's the way this is going to work. The Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017 requires that the California Department of Motor Vehicles to deny registration renewal or transfer of any non-compliant vehicle. So that's where they're going to get you. Okay. So you could be okay all year if your vehicle doesn't renew until December.
Right.
But when you go to get your updated license for your vehicle, your updated registration in the state of California, they're going to, and it says, it has a VIN number that says that it's older than 2010, unless you can prove that you have rebuilt the engine. I'm not sure how you prove that, but unless you can, they're not going to allow you to continue. So does that mean that there won't be any trucks as of now not on there? No. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, enforcement of this does not really start until next Wednesday.
Right. And this affects 75,951 VINs that were manufactured between 2007 and 2009.
Right. Yeah, just those. I mean, and there are plenty that are out there that are
Older than that.
But think about that for a second. So starting and divide that's 75,000. So that's 3,000 trucks that need to come off the road next Wednesday. You get where I'm getting at? You take that 76,000, that number that you just mentioned, divide it by 12.
Yeah.
There's an even distribution across all the months. So that's 3,000 trucks that, as of next Wednesday or Thursday, as of next Wednesday at midnight, coming into Wednesday morning, it'll be February 1st, and everybody who was supposed to renew in January and didn't, technically will, and it's pretty easy, to get stopped and see that your registration has not been renewed, and that by itself is going to be a fine. But then you're in violation. So basically, you're going to get red tagged, and that's the end of that truck until you rebuild the engine or get it out of California. So you've got until next Wednesday to get that truck out of California.
So this is the thing that I always question is like, okay, so if I'm from Texas and I have a long haul, do I have to stop at the border unhook, and then a truck has to come and hook up?
Yeah, great question. I was talking to one of the fellows from OIDA yesterday, and I asked him, I said, isn't there a lot of money to be made right now if I go open a warehouse right on the California border on a major highway someplace, and you just come and drop off there, and I'll worry about getting it to wherever it goes in California?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's because there's a lot of people who it's not even clear if you're not going to have an AB5 issue if you live in St. Louis and are driving to California. That while you're in California, that there's going to be an issue right there. So between AB5 and this and everything, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting, and none of the rules are clear yet. We're not trying to, for those of you who are listening, we're not trying to scare you or just give you partial information. The reason we're not saying this is how this is going to be enforced is, other than they're not going to give you your renewal if you're licensed, if you have a registration in California. The rest of it's not clear how they're going to enforce things, when they're going to enforce things, what the enforcement policy, all of that is still out there and not clear to us at this point. Isn't that crazy?
That's California for you.
Yeah. So
I mean, on the one hand, like the implementation of this, the life cycle of these vehicles is somewhere around the average of 15 years, right?
Right.
15, so like, why go to that? Why do that? Why not just let the natural life cycle of those trucks finish out, and then the new regulations are applicable to new trucks being manufactured? It speaks to the ideological motives behind these kinds of government regulations. Like I really believe that, because there's it's very difficult to find any common sense in the application of this stuff. And so it's got to be driven by something. And the only thing I can think of is that ideological motive.
Yeah. So the source I'm looking at says that, excuse me, this comes from Freight Viking, says that the average semi-truck lifespan is generally between 10 to 15 years, with an average mileage of around 750,000 miles.
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay. Semi-trucks can last even longer if proper care and maintenance are done. During the lifespan of the semi-truck, components such as the clutch, gearbox, and shocks will have to be replaced. Yeah, of course. But, how long will the engine last? Like, again, if you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, you're keeping up with making sure that the oil is right, that, that you get all the right things happening, there's no reason why they can't last past the 1,000,000 mile mark. No reason whatsoever.
Yeah, and the thing that frustrates me about that is they never take into consideration in their calculations what the cost of building a new truck and the CO2 footprint that building a new truck creates versus the CO2 emitted by an older vehicle that's still in operation.
Right.
You'll never find them talking about that in an accurate way.
Exactly. And the plastics and resins and so forth that are now used in building out such trucks, there is a lot of fossil fuel used in building a new truck. There is. Sorry. And, if that's what you're trying to slow down, you're not really doing it.
Yeah, it's the failure to take that holistic approach.
Right. Well, speaking of holistic approaches, we're going to talk more about electric vehicles. We've got some news out of Tesla. We got a lot of things to talk about as far as that's concerned. So we'll keep you updated on that and more from the trucking industry. All right here on Mind Your Trucking Business. We'll be back in just a minute. Stay right there.
Catch Landline Now every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, along with an encore presentation weekdays at noon, right here on tncradio.live.
Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, is boosting the image of the industry by telling the story of trucking, and your story can be part of it. Upload a photo, tell us what you love about trucking, or send us a story about a good deed or charitable act in trucking. Be sure to follow us on social media and contact us through truckingmovesamerica.com. That's truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on tncradio.live.
Ron, thank you so much. My name is Jamie Irvin, and I'm with Tom Kelly. Tom, how are you doing?
Fantastic.
Our co-host, James Rogers, is on assignment, so he's not with us today. Today, we've been talking about some of the regulation changes in the state of California, not crazy. and over the last few weeks, we've talked about electric vehicles, and I'd like you to just give us a little recap of what we've talked about so far for those that maybe didn't hear those previous conversations.
Yeah, we've been talking about what we see as somewhat of a false promise of moving into a world. Now, again, we have no problem with electric vehicles. We have no problem with the idea of driving vehicles that have no emissions. Okay, this is not a love fest for diesel-powered vehicles or gasoline-powered vehicles or anything. We're just saying that the current path we're on with battery electric vehicles, BEVs, as they're called in the industry, the problem we have with BEVs is that it can't keep the promises it's making the way we're set up as a country right now. And we've looked at a few of the issues. One of the first issues we looked at was around taxes, okay, and the way things are being taxed. Interestingly enough, one of the senators in the U.S. Senate is now saying we need to pull back and reconsider the tax breaks we're giving to EV owners. And there's a lot behind that. That's breaking news as of today when we record this near the end of January. So yes, there are tax breaks out there, but we're also seeing that many states have to tax the electric vehicles. I mean, they give you a tax break in one hand, but then they give you a tax penalty in another hand because they have to recoup the tax that they're losing by not getting the tax at the fuel pump.
It's complicated.
So, and no two states are the same in their approach, and some states are going to do that per mile. Some states are going to do that each year when you register. Some states are doing that when you buy the vehicle. So it kind of depends on where you live as to how you're going to get but they are going to let's make sure we're clear on this. They're going to get their tax money. These states are not going to give up that tax money that they get right now from each of the stations.
No, exactly. And in addition to that, there's other major problems that we haven't even solved yet in the trucking world, like, for example, parking. And that leads us to another big challenge with our, battery electric vehicles, which is charging stations.
Yeah, we were talking about that a week or two ago, in that we've gotten nowhere in years of talking about the parking issue that we have. Imagine the parking issue we have if everything's electrified. And not just, right now, a lot of trucks park at rest areas, and there's spots at rest areas for trucks, right?
Sure, we see them all the time.
So what happens when you have a whole lot of cars and a whole lot of trucks at a rest area that all need to charge up?
Right. And then that leads me to another one of the issues that we talked about, which is the infrastructure for those charging stations, and even the land needed to build out power plants that would be able to produce the electricity. So that kind of compounds the issue we already have with enough space for charging stations, parking, and so on.
And each charging station is going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. They're not cheap. I mean, I'm talking just to install it, not to run it.
That's right.
And remember, think of anything that's out there in the public like that, from payphones to restrooms to whatever. They're going to get bent and broken, and the guy's going to wake up and go, okay, I'm ready to go. And he's going to drive off with the thing still connected. And we have, stuff happens, right? As Forrest Gump said, stuff happens. And people are going to step in that stuff, and it's going to be, there's going to be damage to those. And so they're not all going to work properly. Plus, things just don't work properly sometimes.
Right. And
so you got to maintain all that. And then on top of all that, one of the things we were talking about from the battery production standpoint is the mining. If you do the math, we don't even know how we're going to get all the stuff out of the ground that we would need to build the batteries as they exist right now. I want to be clear on that, as they exist right now. Now, one of the things we believe and hope in the world of BEVs is that battery technology will improve, and that you will need less raw materials going forward so that you can get smaller batteries that can last longer.
But this is undeveloped, unproven technological advances, just to be clear.
Right.
That we're relying on to make this plan work.
Right. Because
there's another component to that too, though, Tom, right? Because it's not just the materials, it's also the whole drive of trying to go electric and zero emission is supposedly about saving the planet and about, saving humanity. And yet there's an ethical issue on the mining side as well of the kinds of countries and the types of practices that are used in mining for those elements, which involves child slavery. So there's some ethical issues attached to that, in addition to just the actual logistical challenges and the lack of technology. So we're up against it.
As long as I'm driving a green car, I don't care how many kid slaves had to be part of building it.
Yeah, there's something about that I don't like. I can't get behind that, Tom. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so we got a country of origin issue. We've got the social issues that are involved there, the environmental issues of getting the stuff out of the ground.
Yeah, because guess what? We got to use coal, and we got to use diesel and fossil fuels to power all the equipment to get all that stuff out of the ground. So it's not a perfect solution, and we understand that. What other challenges that we have not yet talked about did you want to talk about today?
Okay, so let's pretend for a moment that all the other challenges are resolved. okay, that we can figure out how to do all the other stuff. Let's go back and look at the infrastructure itself. Now, again, I'm referring you all to ATRI's research, okay? And you can go out to the American Transport Research Institute and pull these reports for yourself and look at what they've done and look at how they've documented how they're coming up with the math that they're showing. And, they show their math, okay? They show their math. And
this isn't just our opinion. We're pulling this information directly from those research resources, which are readily available and publicly available, I want to make a point. If it's available to us, it's available to the people who are involved in making these regulations, laws, mandates, and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So you look at this and pick a state, Jamie. Since you live in Canada, you randomly pick a state in America.
All right, let's talk about our good friends in Louisiana.
Louisiana. It's funny you should pick Louisiana, actually, because Louisiana is in the best shape of any state in the United States for what they have to do with their electricity to make BEVs work.
All right.
Now, they produce X number of kilowatt hours each year, or megawatt hours, okay, or gigawatt. What was it? The 1,000 gigawatts.
Yeah, 1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah,
gigawatts or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Louisiana produces 1.21 gigawatts. Okay, let's say that's what they're doing right now. To meet the needs of an electric fleet, that everybody in Louisiana is going to be plugging in and all that kind of stuff, to meet the needs that would be required on just to meet, for everybody to plug in so that they could go driving the next day. Just to meet those needs, Louisiana would need to increase the current power that they produce by 28.3%. That's the best in the entire nation.
28%, like a third.
A third,
almost a third.
So what? So
excuse me.
So if they're running at 100% capacity, let's say that they're only running at 85% capacity. In other words, they could produce more electricity. They're just not producing more electricity. But wherever they are, whatever they're producing right now, would need to increase by 28% just so everybody can plug in.
Okay, just out of curiosity, what does our friends in California need?
They are on the opposite extreme of that. They're not the worst, but they're pretty close to it. They would need to increase 57.2%.
I mean, that level of increase it's not just it's one thing to increase something by a couple percent, right? You can almost do that incrementally year over year without too much difficulty. But when you're talking about needing to more than double your output, that's a rethink on the entire infrastructure statewide.
Well, it's not doubling. Okay, so this is going up by 2/3. So if you're producing 1 gigawatt and now you need to produce 1.6 gigawatt.
Sure, fair enough, but it will be double within a short few years because you're not taking into consider that number doesn't even take into consideration growth.
Growth, exactly. Okay, this is if everything else stayed exactly the same.
Yeah, all things being equal. And we already know that California is browning out every summer from AC use. We already know that their grid is overtaxed and that they don't currently produce enough electricity for their residents. So it's probably closer to double is the real number for California.
So let's talk about how much that's going to cost right after this. TNCradio.live. Mind your trucking business. I'm Tom. He's Jamie. We'll be back in just a minute with more.
TNCradio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
We're all about the news, information, entertainment, talk radio, music, comedy, and topics truckers want to hear. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with retired NASA engineer Homer Hickam, who's the author of Rocket Boys, which inspired the movie October Sky. We're talking with Alex Debogorski. He's one of the original stars of Ice Road Truckers. Chip Davis of Mannheim Steamroller. Music icon and Grammy Award-winning country artist Lee Greenwood. We're speaking with racing legend Mario Andretti. Michael Martin Murphey is a legend on the music scene with wonderful ballads and hits like Wildfire and Cowboy Logic. Curtis Grimes.
Michael McDowell, the 2021 Daytona 500 winner.
Our guest this afternoon is Tom Bodett. You know the name, you know the voice.
The Carolina Monkey Gouger, Jimmy Artis. Today we have the honor of speaking again with Long Haul Paul. Today we have Claire Dunn and Logan Mize with us. Stay tuned and stay safe with TNCRadio.live. Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Thanks, Ron. I'm Jamie Irvin. He's Tom Kelly. James Rogers is on assignment and is not with us today. You're listening to TNCRadio.live, where we are talking about, in our last segment, some of the challenges of developing the infrastructure necessary to charge BEVs, battery-powered electric vehicles, and eliminating ICE, which would be internal combustion engines, from the face of the planet. It is not a straight pathway from where we are today to where some people would like to see us in a total zero emissions world. There's a lot of difficult problems that have not yet been solved. There's reliance on technology that has not yet been developed, that it will be necessary in order for us to meet our targets. And before the break, you left us on a bit of a cliffhanger, Tom, because you were talking about how much additional electricity needs to be produced by state. Louisiana, the best at 28%. California, one of the worst at almost 60%. And we want to talk a little bit about what the cost of developing that infrastructure would be. And remember, we're just talking about the United States. We're not talking about the entire world. So just for the United States, what would be the cost?
Just a little under, and this, remember, this is just to work the electrical infrastructure, okay? A little under $500 billion in today's money.
You know, at the rate that they're printing money, that's just like, we're getting to monopoly money now. We're getting to numbers that it's just to the point where it's not even connected to reality. Yeah,
$500 billion. And remember, this isn't, you do it all at once. This is going out to all the major grids in the U.S. And remember, several states share several grids. So it will be staggered. It will take, time over time. We all know that, how many times do government projects go over cost?
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason being,
how many times do government projects not go over cost?
Yeah. Well,
that's an easier number to probably calculate.
Yeah. So if you figure that it's going to take close to $50 or $35 to $50 billion to install all of the truck parking locations, each of the chargers. Okay, now you add that into what it's going to take to do the install. We're talking that this project could easily get up close to $1 trillion. And guess who's going to pay that $1 trillion?
Every man, woman, and child for the next 100 years.
Yeah. That $1 trillion, that cost is going to be passed on. How does the cost get passed on? Well, it gets passed on by higher electricity rates. So if you don't even have an electric vehicle, okay, you take the bus, you ride a bicycle, you just walk, you're still going to pay for this.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in the meantime, and one of the things we'll address in coming weeks is how much more does it cost to run these vehicles and build them. But let's talk about what we heard just this past week. Okay. Tesla, through Elon Musk on Twitter, announced that they are now going to not build a new one, but really reinforce their plant out in Nevada. And let me pull this article up here so I've got the right information. To build semi trucks, electric BEV semi trucks. That they will employ 3,000 additional workers. They're going to invest billions of dollars to build this out, and that they believe. Let me see if I can. They believe that they can get by 20. I had that number right here in front of me, but I don't have it right now. That by 2024 they'll be pumping out 50,000 electric trucks per year.
By 2024. So
by 2024. So this year.
So that'll deliver that would probably be vehicles being delivered in 2025 then.
Let's say that they get it all ready to go and they start putting them out in 2024.
Right. Take your order this year, deliver next year.
Right. Where are they going to charge all this stuff up now? Tell me again. If we put 50,000 more electric trucks out there next year, how's that going to work? It's obviously not going to work for long haul, though. According to Elon Musk, they recently tested their new technology, their new batteries, and that they pulled 80,000 pounds, 500 miles on one battery charge. I would like that to be true. Mm-hmm. But I think that could only be true if you're going downhill the entire way.
Well, also that you don't encounter cold weather, that like the environmental conditions on that initial test would have to be basically perfect. And the battery is brand new, not aged in any way.
Right. So, that's their best technology that they have right now. If the world is perfect and you go downhill and you have perfect weather and you don't have to make any stops because you're not going through any small towns or, whatever, okay, that everything works perfectly, that they believe they can get 500 mile. Now, understand that everything that we understand right now about charging such a battery would mean that it would take several hours to recharge. Mm-hmm. Okay. So again,
just to give people, I want to give people context on how many trucks 50,000 trucks is. So in 2021, they manufactured 288,000 heavy trucks in the United States. So it's roughly about 17.5% of the total trucks. They're planning on trying to capture about 17.5% of the heavy truck market in the US.
Right. How much are they going to cost? Still working that out. They have not put a price tag on them yet.
Yeah.
So is the market there? I believe the market's there. I believe there are enough people who believe that BEV is our future, that they'll be able to sell them. Okay. But they've already delivered their first batch to PepsiCo, and it's being used as a regional truck. I don't remember where exactly. I don't think it's California, but they are out there. But right now, the trucks they're putting out are not assembly line. They are essentially put together one truck at a time. So they're talking about assembly line building of these trucks starting next year. They're going to spend this year and a couple $1 billion to get the plant ready, get the hire the workers, train the workers, get all that kind of stuff together. And starting next year, maybe the end of next year, but by 2024, by the end of 2024, they'll start pumping out these trucks.
So what I find interesting is, like, for every action, right? We always know there's a reaction. We don't operate in a vacuum. So Tesla plans on rolling out 50,000 trucks. Well, you got to sell them, first of all.
Right.
Second of all, every one of the major semi-truck manufacturers in North America already have produced and started to deliver electric vehicle options. I think of Kenworth drop their T600 last year. We saw the Peterbilt roll out one for garbage pickup. So very vocational in the applications, but there's a lot of competition for these different segments, and it's going to be interesting to look back on today's conversation a couple years from now. And do we have 50,000 Teslas running up and down the highway? Working great and it's all working out, or do we have, thousands of trucks sitting in yards and not being used?
I don't know how they're going to use them all if they can't get them all charged.
Yeah.
I mean, this is making so many assumptions about the ability to charge, about the convenience of being able to find the charging station when you need it. We don't even have standard chargers right now. Okay, there's not a worldwide, we've all agreed upon. I mean, anywhere in America, I could plug my computer into any house that I go to.
That's right.
Okay. Not so sure that we're going to have that in this world of trucking. And we don't have it yet. Will we have it a couple of years from now? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, as long as the 50,000 trucks were deployed across fleets that were only using them for regional short runs, like, under 200 miles a day kind of thing,
right?
With charging stations installed at the fleet's location. But there's another issue with that, is that there's quite an investment on the part of the fleet to get the power to the charging station. So, sometimes you're outside of the city limits because you want to have a lot of space for your fleet. Mm-hmm. Other times, there isn't just readily available utilities that can come in and do it. Sometimes they have to go underground. It's not just so easy to just, but even if you could, I can see that being a place where that would work. But again, I don't know. I guess I'm not an early adopter on anything. I'm always nervous about taking the first one that comes off in a production line, because you're not guaranteed that you're going to have success. You can think back of lots of vehicles that were produced and year one, they were not good.
Yeah. So, so this is going to be interesting. And all those that you mentioned before too, remember, none of them are mass produced yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing as far as semis are concerned are mass produced for BEV at this point. Several are planning it. Several are building towards it, but none are doing it. So again, my name is Thomas and I'm from Missouri, so I'm a doubting Thomas and you got to show me. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. We got to take another break here, Jamie. Come back, wrap all this up, and I got a couple other quick things to talk about as well. So we'll be back in just a minute. TNC Radio.live. Stay right there.
TNC Radio.live, your commercial driver navigation station. Do you have the TNC Radio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the TNC Radio.live app today.
And welcome back to TNC Radio.Live's Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Irvin. James Rogers out today. Jamie, while we were on break, you said you had a question.
So we're talking about Tesla and manufacturing 50,000 Class 8 semi-trucks by 2024. What about servicing those trucks? I'm a parts guy. I'm a service guy. That's where my mind always goes to. That's not a lot of time between now and then to be able to either build new dealerships or retrofit your automotive ones. Like as of right now, Tesla has 220 dealerships nationwide in the United States. That's as of January 16th, 2023. 28% of those dealerships are in California with a total of 62 in that state alone. So you roll out all these trucks, but then what's the plan to service them? What's parts logistics look like? I mean, obviously they're thinking about those things, but it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that in, not only the production, will they be able to meet that deadline, but also can they service it after they sell those trucks?
Well, and then you get into even tougher laws there too, where states like Louisiana, now, you say Tesla has dealerships. Their dealerships, though, are not traditional dealerships, are they?
No, they're not. Unlike the way that the other manufacturers operate, they operate. Tesla owns and operates all its own service centers, so it's under complete control of the company. It's a very different setup than the traditional dealership model that companies like Ford, GM, and just about every other manufacturer in the U.S. uses for automotive. And also that same model exists for Class 8 trucks, of course, as well.
Technically, just to kind of put a finer tooth comb on this, technically, they're not car dealerships. Tesla has 220 stores.
Correct.
Okay, so they're not traditional dealerships, and because of that's how you have to sell new cars in certain states like Michigan, Louisiana, and others. Tesla cannot sell directly to consumers in certain states right now.
Right. I'm looking at a street view of one of the Tesla quote unquote dealerships. It is near a residential neighborhood in a industrial park. So imagine just your standard industrial park with a bunch of industrial buildings, and the Tesla dealership is just one unit in a building with probably 50 units. And it looks more like an office front with I don't see any large man doors. So, it's just glass front and a standard 30-inch wide door to walk into.
Right.
And a bunch of cars in the parking lot.
Right. But not like a dealership parking lot where you walk around and you go, ooh, look at that one. I like that color.
Or a service center.
Right. Yeah. No, none of that kind of stuff exists in a Tesla quote unquote dealership. They're very, very different, and they're licensed differently by the states. Okay. A car dealership license is not like, putting together a bakery.
Right.
Or maybe that's actually what it is like. You have certain rules that go together with if you're making food, right? And you have certain rules that go together if you're selling cars via a dealership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the same kind of rules don't apply if you're selling computers.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I'm looking at this other Tesla dealership, and it's a building standalone by itself, probably looks to be about 10,000 to 15,000 square feet. It has 2 standard bay doors on the one end of the building, 2 that only a car could drive in and out of. So there's no way to get a semi in and out of that bay.
Right.
So even this particular one, a little bit different. It's actually more of a standalone building. It's in a car industrial park. There's a Subaru dealership right next door. And, but again, only 2 bays and only bays big enough for automotive applications. So that's a legitimate issue.
So at the end of the day, okay, when you buy a Tesla from a Tesla store, you're actually just buying a car online.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what's happening there. And it breaks the rules of several states. That's not how you're allowed to sell a car. Okay? And so Tesla's in battle with multiple states. We're going to run into the same thing with trucks. How are they going to fix this? This is another one of those. Okay, yeah, you like you said, you produced 50,000 of them, but is the not that people won't want them, but the system doesn't exist yet for them to be able to sell 50,000. I don't think.
Yeah. Or charge them, or like go down that long list of things we've been talking about. There's just a lot of holes that have yet to be filled in order to make this plan work nationwide. It's very problematic.
Yep, it is. Hey, we're almost out of time, but before we go, I'm going to give you a tip of what we're going to be talking about next time, which is the Ship It Act. Now, Jamie, you're up in Canada, so you're probably not familiar with the Ship It Act, and most people listening to this as recorded on January the 26th may not have heard about it yet because it was just introduced on January the 24th. It comes from a representative from South Dakota, Dusty Johnson, a Republican, and Jim Costa, a Democrat from California. Yep. Conservative Republican and a Democrat got together and put together the Safer Highways and Increased Performance for Interstate Trucking Act. In other words, Ship It Act. This is H.R. 471. We're going to talk about this in more detail next week and some of the pluses and minuses here. And there are plenty of both. This would allow states to have more regulatory control over overweight vehicles and loads during emergencies. It would give drivers tax credits depending on how long they've been driving and how much money they make. It's got a lot of interesting things in it. It does provide for parking and looks to expand truck parking. It's got a lot of interesting things, but there's also some real concerns that some of our friends from OOIDA and others are saying about this bill as well. So the Ship It Act is probably the most comprehensive bill to directly impact the industry that we've seen in quite a while. So we'll talk about that one next week. All right, with that, Jamie, it's time for us to wrap up. How can people learn more about what you're doing?
Head over to heavydutypartsreport.com. We are publishing new episodes every single week talking about the world of parts and service on heavy duty trucks. Love to have you come listen to the show.
And James, of course, you can catch his podcast at the Road Rage Podcast on YouTube. So you don't want to miss that. James Rogers and the Road Rage Podcast on YouTube. Of course, TNCradio.live, 24/7 of information and news and discussion and all the types of things. That's the Truckers Network channel right here on TNCradio.live. We're here all the time. Catch up on all of our shows. And if you missed a show, you can find it on our podcast on just about any podcast distributor that you are listening to. So with that, I'm Tom Kelly. He's Jamie. With that, I'm Tom Kelly. He's Jamie Irvin. And we'll be back next week with Mind Your Trucking Business.